Hey, this is Jose Galison, and this is No Way Jose. I'm on the No Way Jose YouTube channel. You can also find me on all the major podcatchers. This right here is a live stream. So to catch this, like the initial, you obviously got to do it on YouTube. It's also on Twitter as well. I stream from the Tower Gang one because I'm a tech boomer. I don't know how to set up the Periscope and shit. So whatever, it'll be in the Tower Gang one. It gives you a reason to follow them and me. But I also want to say a quick thank you to Justin for that intro. At JCamp1521, he's a silent guy behind like a lot of the fucking big dogs. He does a lot of their work and shit. So yeah, I really appreciate the help with that, Justin. I really dig it. It kind of works out perfectly that we're going to be having a Hoppean. Anyone who knows Hoppeans knows the joke there. So my guest today is Jared of TheHoppean.org. Like I said, this is a live stream. This will only be available like basically the day of, and then I'm immediately put it on private. That way my patrons have a fucking reason to be patrons. And this will get released later as an episode. It's like a numbered episode. But oh, sorry. Sometimes distracting me these comments. Someone says my favorite rare cat breeder, better than break the cycle. Thank you. Yeah, let me see. Also, there's super chats live now. So if you guys have questions, it's really hard for me not to fight the instinct to just like read all of these. But I mean, luckily it's a small stream, so even if I did that today, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. We have all these massive streams going on. But yeah, I got Jared today. We're gonna be talking Hoppeanism. I want to mostly focus on just like Hoppe in general, and then I do kind of want to have a little bit of conversation how that intersects with agorism and such. I think that'll be fun. As always, I like money. If you don't like money, I don't know the fuck's wrong with you, or don't know the fuck's wrong with you. Patreon.com, so it's No Way Jose 2020. Also, make sure you go check out TopLobsta. TopLobsta.com is where you can get shit. He's got my merch. He's got plenty of other merch. Great shit. Yeah, let's go ahead and bring in Jared. What's up, dude?
Hey, Jose. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, God, I'm glad it didn't glitch out. Just so you guys know, there's been a little bit of internet issues. So if anything worse comes to worse, this will like kind of maybe turn to a Q&A. But hopefully we can make this work. But yeah, you want to go ahead and quickly introduce yourself? Oh yeah, real quick. I'm assuming you got the joke.
Yeah.
I didn't plan that at all. I wasn't like, let's get a hop in for the first one.
But yeah, so I'm Jared at In Democracy on Twitter. I am the founder of Hoppean.org. You can follow Hoppean.org on at TheHoppean on there, and we're also on all the other major social media platforms. But yeah, that's who I am.
Awesome. So just real quick, first question. How was it transitioning?
It was rough, man. You got to feed me. You got to give me some more of those pills.
Anyone who know, Hoppeans are renowned online for being into anime and being trannies for some weird ass reason.
I don't know even where that. I swear to God, I've never met a fucking tranny Hoppean. Like legitimately, I've never fucking seen them, and it's everywhere. Like
it's
that
borderline an oxymoron.
Yeah, I know. Like what the fuck? Like how in the hell does that even happen? I don't even understand. But anyway, yeah. As Jose said, I like money too. I got to put that in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of want to touch on current events. We'd be remiss not to.
Oh my God, yeah.
Pretty fucking big. And I also wanted to, I think you saw my tweet. I figured you'd probably get a kick out of it because, honestly, then it kind of gives me, I don't know if you want to real quick while I bring it up, let everybody know what the fuck even happened if they're living under a rock.
Yeah. So today, Psaki, the mouthpiece for the Biden administration and Joe Biden, have put out essentially what is a de facto mandate for everyone to have a vaccine, not only for government workers, of which only the Postal Service is somehow excluded from, but not only every other government worker, but also every government contractor. And then I think Psaki said that they were going to talk later about having a mandate, and then for the rest of us, and then he came out with a statement saying, if you're I think he came out with that, didn't he? I didn't check. Did he actually say it?
I honestly have not been following it too much. I'm not a huge current events guy, but I mean, I only saw the bits and pieces I saw of announcements on Twitter.
So I
So,
know
I mean,
for
yeah.
yeah, so I know for a fact that she said that yes, they would be mandating it for everyone else. I don't know if Biden actually said that or not, but that's what she said. And all of these state reps, all of these GOP state organizations now are calling for special sessions.
Mhm.
I called for my local rep to call a special session because I got really red-faced pissed off because this is, I mean, we're here. I mean, in 3 months, we're going to have camps. I mean, we're at the brink right now, right? I mean, because there's so many of us, not only just libertarians, but boomer cons and regular conservatives and even some neocons, which I'm really surprised that I saw, are against this. And they're saying it's not going to happen and we're not going to do this because neocons they're leftists, right? Mm-hmm. So usually you would expect them to go right along with this. But there were a couple that I was surprised to see weren't on board with that. So we'll see what happens, but it may be closer. Chopper time may be closer than previously anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, I was very, I was kind of shocked because like whenever I knew there was gonna be this big announcement, it brought to mind the big gun control shit a while back where they just kind of did some shit around the edges. Which don't get me wrong, like obviously any gun control I don't like, but it's kind of like they made it out to be this big thing, and it was kind of like, oh,
yeah,
that's what it was, and
it
I
wasn't
kind of
that
got
big,
this.
yeah.
And even then, this still like has in my head still didn't kind of get the hype that I feel like people were building up to, but it was still pretty substantial. Yeah. But I think I'm very curious to see how the fallout is from this. But I will say, I mean, most people who follow me know that I'm prior active duty military. I like literally just got out in the past few months.
Oh, did you really? I didn't know that.
Yep. Yeah, I know. I've been doing this podcast for like 9 months, and like 7 months of which I was active duty military, and I just like was doing it. I mean, my name's made up. I mean, if you guys can't tell, I'm clearly not Hispanic. So like for that reason, I made up the name. Well, partly. I mean, it was also just it's nice to have a little bit of anonymity, as you can tell.
Yes.
But I am kind of having that firsthand knowledge, like for them to do it to like federal employees, like military, seems like they could do it. Like, I mean, no one's really gonna fight back against that because it's always gonna be that argument of like, well, they signed up for it, they got to do what they got to do. I mean, there's truth to that. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But then the big thing that kind of fucked my head was the federal contractors part, because like, like being on a military base, being on a military base, like there's people do everything. There's plumbers, it's basically a little fucking town on the military base.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, I don't even see how it's doable. Like we legit have like Mexicans mowing the lawn and shit. Like how the fuck are you gonna enforce this?
I mean, it's not only that, but think about all of the contractors that go out for independent government contracts, all the people that provide phones or phone service or equipment like LBVs and shit like that, or weapons manufacturers, Colt. I mean, like these people are also a majority or at least half of America that he just did in one fell swoop. And now he's saying, or his mouthpiece is saying he's going to do the rest. I mean, like we're on the brink here of something really bad. And people, I don't know what's going to happen because look, I mean, the last thing I remember where the military was mobilized to enforce something that was widespread was integration, right?
Yeah.
Where you see all those pictures online of the, World War II soldiers coming in and, they've got M1 Garands pointed at regular, 1950s looking people, right? I mean, and they're forcing them at bayonet point to go away and we're going to integrate and this is the way it's going to be. And that I feel like we're not far away from that. I feel like it's going to happen. Like if it continues down this path of acceleration, because we're on an acceleration curve, in my opinion. And this latest jump was a big jump, and all it's going to take is another month, and we're going to see even worse shit if this is allowed to go unchecked. The good thing that I've seen is, like I said, a lot of GOP state organizations and even governors now, I think I saw 2 or 3 governors already come out and say, we're going to fight you. So hopefully they succeed because this is just absurd.
Yeah. No, I do want to push back a little bit there though, because you kind of mentioned like the military and like you brought up the I forget the exact the college or whatever the fuck from like the 50s. 60s,
I can't
whatever.
remember. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I'll think of it later because it's like a famous event. But
Are
yeah,
you talking about Kent State? I'm not talking
yeah.
about Kent
Oh,
State.
okay. I thought you were implying.
No.
But,
I'm
yeah.
talking about desegregation
Oh,
when
okay.
there were a bunch
okay.
of
Yeah. But what I'm getting at is like I know I've heard a lot of talking points about how we'll have troops in the streets and like maybe you kind of might, but I don't see. And I know I say this, but at the same time we had the lockdowns a while ago, and there was a little bit of that. I mean I guess maybe I'm being a little naive because that's happened already. I just gave you an example, but me coming from the military, I kind of see that culture, and I was in for 11 years.
Oh, I know.
And,
yeah, a lot of my buddies have been in
Yeah.
for a long time. My dad was in, my grandfather was in. There's a lot of good guys in there,
Yeah.
straight up. There really are, and there are a lot of hardcore right wingers in the military. Still, I mean, Biden and Obama did a pretty good job of clearing the brass out, from what I know. But your regular ground pounders, your 11B guys, that they're pretty normal people. I mean. They're not going to be ones to do that. But then again, if you're ordered to do something, it's hard to say no. That takes a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, I say that, but at the same time, I just don't see the culture there right now. I will say, me being in for 11 years, when I first joined, like I was a mechanic, and it's a very similar culture from what I've been told to like the infantry and stuff, because we're fucking grease monkeys. We're working with our hands. We're kind of the downtrodden. We're not like, and I was in the Air Force, but like that was not the chair force part of the Air Force.
Yeah.
Like I was actually like doing shit, but like just the culture, I just don't see it being there. And they've tried to change it. I'll give it that, because my point being, I was in for 11 years. When I first got in, like there would be like dudes that have like nudie mags in their lockers, and there'd be like we had like Donger the maintenance unicorn like stickers everywhere, which was like a unicorn where it was literally a wiener for a horn. Like that was the kind of, it was dudes, like it was dudes rock type aesthetic, and fucking like they have changed that, because like there was one dude I know got kicked out for drew a dick on a piece of paper, and it was in the aircraft forms, and he was going to take it out like when it was done, and they like found it and they like kicked him out. And so there was this push. Well, to be fair, they didn't kick him out. They pulled the stripe, and then it put him to where he was in a spot to where he was at what's called higher tenure, to where he couldn't re-enlist. So they basically sort of soft forced him out.
Right.
But anyways, the culture did change, and they had been trying to change it. I mean, there still is that, like, even when I left, there was still that like remnant of that.
Right.
But I don't think they are quite there. So, and they are clearly trying to orient things. Like during the Obama administration, there was kind of a culture shift, is where it started.
That's what I remember. I remember a lot of guys being like, hey, like our commander got switched out. What the fuck? Like that doesn't happen, right? I remember that. I remember specifically one of my friends saying that happened, and that there was some shit getting ready to go down. And like I got a couple of calls late at night. And he's like, I can't tell you what the fuck is going on, but like be fucking ready. Like fucking have your fucking shit loaded, because if they do what we think they're gonna do, like his immediate report was telling him to be fucking ready, because they aren't gonna take it, and all that kind of shit. Because there was a lot of, from what I know, which is disconnected. I've never been in the military. I don't want anybody to ever have that thought that I was ever in. I was never served in the military. And nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not one of the guys that it's like, you're in the military, you're a baby killer, like that's not me. Right. So
I only killed a couple.
Yeah. And it was for fun. So
it was off duty.
Yeah. So like I remember that shit going down. And that is one of the distinct things that stood out to me, is like, if nothing comes of this, right, they've already won, because they're already starting to shift the culture in that way. And now all they need is another one to come in, because they've already done it once, and they're going to keep pushing it. And I feel like that's probably persisted through the Biden administration.
Yeah. No, Reed Coverdale had some tweet today or some shit. And it was something about, like, I think it was about the Chipman thing. And it was like he basically was implying they kind of wish he got put in, because it would kind of, it's the whole idea of the boiling the frog, or I like to say kicking a weasel.
Yeah.
Like, it's the difference in the two. And I don't know which side of the fence this is on. I have a hard time believing all of this is going to stand. So I don't know, to some extent, like I get where it's like the culture shift, but I just have a hard time believing that it's there or even that it's enforceable. So like that was kind of what I was getting with, like, yes, maybe the military. So I could see like them rolling back this shit, but that's kind of what they do. They kind of like they make a big step and then they get slapped back and then they end up taking a little step. So this will probably, I mean, in my opinion, if I had to guess, it'll probably just likely just end up with the military being, obligated to do so, and then maybe some other little fringe things here and there. But I don't even see how you could even possibly enforce, even just simply on the military base itself, the contractors. It's just that's just insane.
Yeah, and a lot of times though, like it isn't so much that it's enforceable, it's just the fact that it's the rule, right? So it gives people an excuse too, right? Like, hey, I've got this, colonel who's kind of right wing and he's never going to take this vaccine. That gives me a perfect excuse to kick him out now, right? Like he violated direct orders, so now he's done, right? So there's that kind of thing. But also, I would say I'd push back a little bit on you, and I'd say I never thought 6 months ago that there would literally be people in camps in Australia. Like I never would have thought that would have fucking happened. And then I'm sure some people are thinking, well, look what happened with the gun control stuff in Australia in 97. So maybe they were already on that path. But, there you can get into some details and things there around different cultures, not only different cultures, but also the 90s was kind of weird, even the United States, right? Like we had the 94 assault weapons ban. The whole world was kind of moving that way, right? So it wasn't until recently, in my opinion, the past, 10, 15 years that we really started push back in the gun control space, right? Like, because we were losing bad at every fucking step. And thank God for, like the lobbyist, pro-gun lobbyist groups, because they've done some really damn good work. And holy shit, I wish we had an anti-COVID lobbyist group now, like this, they would really help. But who knows? I mean, it's hard to say, and I'll give you that. I have no idea. It could go either way, and it's really hard to say.
Yeah. While we're on that point, I figure I'll go ahead and read the tweet because it kind of applies to your point here. I said, hey, at Governor Ron DeSantis, show us you're as willing to stand up to a tyrannical government as you are to infringe on private businesses. Extend your vaccine status disclosure executive order to those factions of the federal government within Florida. I think he won't. Prove me wrong. I was obviously negging him, but
he needs to do that though.
Yeah,
I mean, he's got to do that. I mean, I think all of these, I think, and I hope a lot of special sessions will be called and a lot of nullification legislation is going to get passed. And I hope it happens because that will set a precedent that's really good for us.
Yeah, no, I would love, because I mean, if we can get people to neg him to be like, hey, you did this too, because I mean, don't get me wrong, with his executive order, and a lot of people are upset about it. I mean, don't get me wrong, definitely it's not cool that he did infringe on private businesses or some, because I'm very much of the opinion that some things don't necessarily qualify as private businesses that people think do. So
I don't disagree with that entirely. I think that there are definitely entities and organizations that claim private status that shouldn't necessarily get to claim that private status anymore.
But they don't have this clear delineation, and so that's the issue when they're writing legislation. So like that's why these people got caught up in it. And so to me, it's kind of like, okay, well, you had this thing that fucking infringed against like actual private, because it is going to affect mom and pop places if some fucking mom and pop retard is like wants to do this, which I mean, to some extent, kind of like, well, fuck that guy. But you know what? I mean, we got to be somewhat principled and be like, yeah, well, that's a property,
right?
But you know what?
Why can't people understand that? It really bothers me that libertarians aren't like, they don't live in reality. Like, they try and live in Capistan in their head. You can be realistic and also principled, right? Like you can hold a set of principles and say, this is the goal, this is where we're going, but how we get there, who the fuck cares? Like, this is fucking real. Like, this is real. These are people's lives. Like, let's make it fucking happen however we can fucking make it happen. And I'm leaning more towards, I'm not a consequentialist in philosophy. I'm not. I'm very much an ideologue. That being said, in strategy, I would definitely say that I'm leaning more and more towards whatever it takes. And there's a myriad of ways you can justify certain actions, especially under libertarian principles, because we're not anti-violence, we're anti-aggression, and the state itself is violence. So as long as I'm living under it, there can be some justification there. So
yeah. I mean, to touch on like Hoppe or something, I think if Hoppe was to write this legislation, he probably would have like somehow included something that if you get any sort of state, subsidies or anything whatsoever, then you know what, this applies to you.
Yeah.
So because and that would honestly, I know a lot of people get upset with the private business aspect of it, but honestly, that would probably cover like 99% of them, because even the small little mom and pop is probably in some way benefiting to some extent from the fucking government.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the state has got its hands in everything, and that's why everything's corrupt, and that's why the market's kind of fucked up. I mean, I think libertarians a lot of times don't realize how absolutely different the world would look in a real free market without the state. I mean, it would look very different. I mean, I'm not saying that a lot of our institutions and things like that wouldn't exist. I'm saying that the way things work right now and the cultural results and things like that would occur in the absence of the state, it's going to make the world, it would make the world look totally different.
Yeah. I want to hit up some of these super chats real quick before they get too piled up. Toad, before he even started, said Jose isn't really an agorist because he ain't fat, only his PP is. Yeah, it's a joke that I have a fat dick, because they look at me and they assume my dick is probably of a similar build to me. So,
Toad's picture in that looks like he's trying to get a shot, like get a picture of it or something. Look at him, he's like, yeah, give me that picture.
Let's see what we got. All right, $20 is $20. All right, Daniel, I totally intended on like wearing a bra under this, because there was like a joke. I made a joke on Twitter about that, like, I'll do anything for money, kind of joking. And he was like, would you wear a bra for $20 on live stream? And I was like, sure. But then I totally forgot about it, and I'm not prepared. I'm not going to like stop, go grab a bra from my wife's fucking shit and throw it on. I mean, also, it's like, I don't even really care. I don't give a shit. Like, what? I got to be shirtless for, like, whatever. I don't give a fuck. Like,
you started an OnlyFans.
Like, I don't give a shit. Yeah. For the next one for you, Daniel, the next live stream, I will fucking wear it. Just remind me, and I will wear it. And I appreciate the $20. I will wear a bra. I don't give a fuck. Whatever. I got to show off my pecs for a minute. I don't give a fuck. What else we got? We got what's up, Jose and Jared from Marshall. Hey, what's up, dude?
What's up, dude?
Yeah. See comment below if it's a good question. As bad as this is, could this vaccine mandate be seen as a white pill in a way? Acceleration. That's kind of what I was implying a little bit, that there might be some of that.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, if this causes, for what we were talking about, the military to be activated and start enforcing this, it's going to accelerate. However, you're going to see, this is why I get really kind of sideways about the collapsitarians, because a collapse is going to be horrifying. People really don't understand how bad it can get. Americans, especially, and a lot of the West, are they're soft, and they don't understand just how absolutely terrible things can get and how quickly things will devolve. People aren't going to care about libertarian principles when their kids are starving. They're going to kill your ass. They don't care, right? I mean, and that's the bad side of that. It's got to be a controlled descent, not a free fall.
I mean, I would say a lot of people accuse me of being an accelerationist, but I understand that the route that I would like people to pursue will, to some extent, destabilize things, but in other aspects, it will open up windows.
Right.
So it's like, I'm telling you, hey, shit's going bad, and I'm saying let's go do shit that will make your life better. But I understand that, like, I don't know if you've looked into archetropism, but it's going to cause, a concentration of power elsewhere.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure it will. I mean, right? And it's true to an extent. When you have power that collapses, you believe power.
All right, you're cutting it out, bud. I'm gonna read some more of these super chats and see if it gives you a second to. All right, I gotta bounce, but we'll watch later. Jose, you're my favorite Hispanic. Keep up the good work. This is from Daniel 3. Yeah, guys, go follow his podcast, Daniel 3, Biblical Anarchy. He's good stuff. If you're into all that, like, Sky Daddy stuff. No, but for real though, I mean, it's good stuff. I joke all the time that I say all the time that there's a lot of utility in religion. I think there's something to be said there. I may be an atheist, but I see utility in it for sure. Yeah, and that's all we got. Hey, you want to talk for me? See if your shit's doing better.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you now. It's all fixed. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So what was I talking about? I'm retarded.
We were talking about accelerationism, and then I was obviously implying agorism, and I would even say, or Hoppean's tactics, kind of too, would do similar things.
Yeah,
where
I
it's
think
you're opening up avenues of yourself for success, but obviously you're kind of leaving the fucking retards who don't want to jump on in the dust to some extent.
Yeah, I think that my plan would be, the same as Hoppe's, is like if we're going to get to that point, let's have the structures in place so that at least the local level or, even the state level to support getting to our goal when shit does go wrong, right? Because eventually the state will collapse, right? The natural order will reassert itself in some way. So we need to have a plan in place. And I think that is really where we should be focusing, is getting that plan in place for when it does happen.
Oh yeah, no, I'm telling you, we'll get into it later, but I really think that, maybe especially when you see my perspective on agorism might be a little bit different than others. I think we are perfect natural allies, and we're very much saying a lot of the same things, but with slightly different aspects to it. But let's do a little bit of fucking 101 shit, just because I know a lot of people probably. Hoppe is one of those ones I feel like maybe people like me and you just kind of assume people know more of, but they probably don't. Because we're a little bit more well-read. Not that I'm that well-read. I'll be honest, I haven't read a ton of Hoppe. I've read Democracy of the God That Failed, and I want to say I listened to one or two other audiobooks that were I wish I could remember. I think it was the socialism, capitalism one he has.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know which one I'm talking about.
Theory of Socialism,
yeah,
Capitalism.
Yeah, and there was some other one. It was a smaller one I listened to once, and I definitely enjoy. I think he had some other one where he kind of went to the history of how a lot of statism and
Short History of Man.
Yep, that one. But yeah, no. So that's kind of what I've done. But I've never really done a deep dive on Hoppe, which is, don't get me wrong, I think Hoppe has a lot to offer, but there's something. I was talking to someone the other day. I wish I could remember who, and we were kind of talking about it's a Buck Rebel.
Oh yeah, I love Buck. He's a good
I
dude.
love Buck. He's awesome. But yeah, guys, if you're listening, go subscribe. I don't know why the fuck he's not at 1,000 subs. You need to get him there. Get him fucking monetized in there. Although I know he's monetized elsewhere. I guess he said he just kind of didn't really pay attention to his YouTube. But anyways, we were talking about how when it comes to Hoppe and stuff, and or a lot of thinkers in general, like Hoppe, Rothbard, Mises. Sometimes I feel if you are someone who's well read in one of them, say for me, I'm a little bit more well read in Rothbard, even though I'm not super well read in Rothbard. So for me, that kind of, while it may not be true to some extent, I'm I kind of don't really need to read Mises now, because Rothbard kind of is a filter of Mises through his lens, and then he obviously has some different thoughts and stuff, but he kind of is filtering Mises' thoughts through his own, and to some extent Hoppe is doing the same, but I know he has different stuff as well. So
yeah.
And so
I can see that.
Yeah, so there's a fault in that too, where it's you kind of you're oh, well, I read Rothbard, I kind of don't need to read Hoppe, I kind of need Mises, and that's not true. But it's kind of you're I already read that. So for me, I'm well, I'm going to go down different trails because I've kind of already covered that. There's so much shit to read in the libertarian thing.
There is.
So anyone out there, don't ever get condescending about whether someone's read something or not. Because correct me if I'm wrong. Have you even read Konkin?
I have. I've read. Okay. I've read NLM. I haven't read. I've read some other articles and stuff that he posted. I think there's some stuff on Agorist Nexus or something like that. I read a couple of those, but
you should read Agorist Primer. I actually like Agorist Primer better. But yeah,
have I read that? I may have read that. It's been a while if I read it.
He's a super small body of work. You literally could knock it out in a weekend. Anyone. But anyways, my point being is even the smartest of people hasn't read everything because there's so much goddamn shit to read. So most people kind of pick a lane. So. But yeah, so anyways, my point I'm getting at is, for you, who is Hoppe? And so we're going to do 101 for the people out there.
Yeah. So Hans Hermann Hoppe obviously was Murray Rothbard's protege. He developed argumentation ethics. Argumentation ethics, to me, is one of the most astounding leaps forward in philosophy in the last 200 or 300 years. It totally demolished Hume's guillotine, made irrelevant, in my opinion, the is-ought gap. Which, if you're familiar with philosophy, it's one of the things that stumped libertarians for 100 years. I mean, we didn't know how to get past the classic natural rights theory. Like, and then Hoppe just comes along one day and he's like, oh yeah, knock that out in 3 pages, no big deal. And then like, how in the hell do you not win like a fucking Nobel Prize for that? I mean, like, it's absolutely brilliant, and he doesn't get enough recognition for
we'll
it.
cover that for sure. I do want to cover that because I will admit I haven't taken a deep dive in argumentation ethics. I know I listened to the episode on Tower Power you did the other day, and they were talking about how we had a conversation on it. And I want to be clear to anyone out there and you that I was coming from a place of I'm not super well read on it, but this is my impression. And I was like, we were kind of like just talking it out. It was one of those like autism moments between homies. We were like we were trying to figure it out amongst ourselves kind of deal. So like it wasn't at all like I was taking an opinionated route at all. I was just like, these are my impressions. For me, it always struck me as, like you said, as an attempt at bridging the is-ought divide. Which, I mean, one of them was like, no, that's not what it is. And so I don't know. We'll get into that. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but you can go ahead. Just let you know, you don't have to go too deep into that yet, because that's a whole other fucking can.
Oh, it's a whole discussion, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
we won't go deep into it. I'm going to try my best to not push back, because for me, it's just like the bits I've heard, it still doesn't add up. And
it can. I mean, it can get confusing. There are plenty of very well-read people and people who deeply understand argumentation ethics that still have questions that I'm sure they need to pose to Professor Hoppe. But so Professor Hoppe developed that. He also wrote, obviously, Democracy, the God That Failed, which to me is one of the preeminent rejections of the entire modern state. Not only the modern state, but a lot of people's modern conception of the modern state. And what I mean by that is, when you talk to your average person, they're going to be like, well, democracy is a good thing. Well, Hoppe systematically proves that it's not a good thing. And in fact, it's the direct degeneration of any type of order. It is the opposite of order. It is the rejection of the natural order. And he does that. He explains why there is a tendency towards centralization. And then as a result, there's also this degeneration of the types of what would you call it? The types of states. So you can get into this and talk about, from, monarchy. And then you have what you would call kind of a feudal king or the feudal era. And that degenerates into an absolute king. And then from an absolute king to a constitutional king, and from constitutional kings to republican forms of government, and from republican forms of government to democracies. And then eventually from democracies to and the absolute destruction of any of that. And eventually, I think you'll see that here. We've already, America has very much fled from the path of republicanism, is now delving very deeply into a form of democracy. And, you can easily make the case that republicanism is a form of democracy as well, but it doesn't really make any difference.
Democracy with more steps,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
it's a more confusing democracy.
Exactly. Yeah. And in some ways, that was the kind of like the founders thing, right? Like, democracy is terrible. What we can do? Well, I add all these steps to make it really terrible, and then people won't use it. Well, they found ways around that. The state always does and always will. But yeah, I mean, Professor Hoppe also talks about several other things. I think one of his books that people don't read a lot of is The Economics and Ethics of Private Property. Please, for the love of God, go read that book, guys. If you haven't read it, go read that book. It's awesome. It'll really give you an appreciation for private property that maybe no other libertarian philosopher has really given anyone else. And then a short book that I always recommend people to read. I recommend. I have Human Action. I've read it, but Jesus. Short history, man. We were just talking about that. If you really want to understand why the division of labor is so important, and why it's so beautiful, and why the division of labor brought us out of absolute darkness, how it brought us out of being animals, essentially, that is it. I mean, you're going to learn very quickly that the inequality and how we escaped the Malthusian trap through separation, why separation is so important, and how the division of labor and private property came to be. If you want to understand libertarianism, I mean, especially from a kind of an evolutionary standpoint, go read Short History of Man.
Yeah. I would also, not to throw you off, if you're into that kind of thing and looking from a historical perspective, pair it with Against the Grain by James C. Scott, which I don't know if you've read that. That's a great book. He kind of goes into the history of states and how they were formed, and like in relation to anarchy and stuff, and how history doesn't necessarily tell the story of anarchists, and they pair well. Like they paired so well. I think I read them around the same time. I have a hard time differentiating between the two, and they kind of like complement each other well.
That's awesome. I haven't read that. I may have to check it out.
No, it's great. It's very, apparently I want to say he identifies himself as like a left anarchist, but you kind of really can't tell. It's really cool how he kind of really the biggest thesis he gets out of that is how the states were formed around the advent of agriculture. And how and I'm pretty sure Hoppe goes into that as well.
I would say that I wouldn't say that the state formed around the advent of agriculture. I would say more private property formed around the advent of agriculture. I mean, because like if you think about it from just a very basic perspective, is if you're a caveman or what have you, if you're a very early human, right? What's the first form of private property? How do you homestead? Well, probably from picking berries and bringing some water to the plant, or moving that plant somewhere else, and doing things like that, where you're starting to branch out, not from owning little pieces of things that you found or that you made, but into agriculture and developing things and keeping them going, and things like that. But anyway, go read that book. I mean, holy crap, Short History Man's awesome.
Yeah, but on the against the grain thing though, the point I was getting as it also goes into like how whether you want to say around agriculture or private property, it was to some extent it was like a centralization of humankind, and then it formed around it. Whether you want to say it was whether it was agriculture or that, but agriculture kind of bore out more of a reason to have private property. Not that you didn't have it before, right. Yeah, and it's kind of cool. He kind of talks about how history tells the story of them, and you kind of have this skewed idea, like even just like thinking about barbarians, like what thoughts that brings up to your mind. And those were the kind of words they were using for the people who lived on the outskirts of the state, who were more the ones still the hunter gatherers and stuff. And he actually shows through historical means that they actually did way better than the fucking people who were living in the states. Like you look at their bones and shit, and they were healthier, they were living better lives. It's just that we get told the tale of like, look at these people.
The false tale of false progress.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah. So anyway, that's a pretty good, concise description of Hoppe. I really like, if you want to get into Hoppe, and if I could only recommend one book, if you're already a libertarian, you understand some basic libertarian principles, go read Getting Libertarianism Right. That will really tell you how Hoppe diverges from a lot of other libertarians, and that'll really tell you what Hoppe is. Now, that isn't going to tell you everything about Hoppe. It's not going to tell you all of his brilliant contributions and things like that, but it'll give you a good basis, a good direction of where he is and why he's going that direction. Yeah,
I mean, that would be a good segue, but I do want to back up for my next point. I wanted to touch on real quick. This isn't even, I guess not even touch on. I just want to provide an anecdote that with his like the whole democracy monarchy concept with Hoppe, that is an amazing way, a fucking beautiful way of picking out the fucking like the shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just like I used to like all the time, but especially when I first started my account, I would just for fun, like I would throw out shit like anarchy is greater than monarchy, which is greater than democracy or whatever. Yep. People would there'd be so much it was just beautiful.
Oh, I know. I love it.
And like now, I mean, back then I wasn't like so block heavy, but now, like say if I was to do that again, for me, I would just be like, okay, go ahead and show your face. And all right, block.
On Twitter, after the whole thing with me originally getting doxxed and then going dark for a while and then getting banned and all of that, I don't deal with it anymore. Why would I deal with bullshit anymore? Like, I'm not trying to convince these people they're not anywhere near me. I'm never going to do it. So why do even entertain them? Like, to me, that's a total waste of my time. It's an inefficient use of resources. So that's why I'm extremely block heavy now. Like, you start shit with me, or you don't want to argue honestly, bye. Like, you get out of my covenant community. You know what I mean?
Not in my covenant community.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we talked on Tower Power the other day, and I brought up that like when it comes to influencing people, you shouldn't be an asshole. But what the other side of that though is, but are you trying to influence people?
Right.
And when it comes to like something like Twitter, or just really, I think in general, I think the better move there are certain people you should be trying to influence, and there are other times like I prefer identifying the in group and excommunicating the out group.
Right. Me
So,
too. I think it's a great way to do things. And I think that libertarians especially need to learn how to gatekeep. I think that there's a serious problem. I hate mentioning this because I'm never going to finish it, but I'm writing a book. One of the chapters in the book is about subversion, because the right has a very, very hard and bad problem with subversives. If you look at the old right, Murray Rothbard became a libertarian because of the subversives on the right. He said, look at these neocons that are coming into the old right. Why the hell would I associate with the GOP or the Republicans anymore? They're all a bunch of fucking communists. Like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go do my own thing. And that's persisted. It's not only happened in the GOP, it's happened in the Libertarian Party. It's happened everywhere.
Yeah. I do want to, I said earlier there was a good segue. I missed the opportunity for a good segue. So, segue. How do you feel like Hoppe differs from Rothbard? Because Hoppe kind of followed Rothbard to some extent. So
yeah, so I would say Hoppe and Rothbard diverge very little in practical sense. I very much view Hoppe as the evolution of Rothbard. I don't necessarily view them at odds on anything. And I think even Murray Rothbard, if he were alive, would agree with that. I mean, called Hoppe brilliant. There was very little I think that they ever disagreed on. In fact, Rothbard said that Hoppe had proven him wrong. He proved that his the pretense of the natural rights theory that Rothbard had used to develop a lot of libertarianism was an incorrect starting point. And Hoppe did that through argumentation ethics, and Rothbard praised him repeatedly for that. And I think that Hoppe and Rothbard were probably traveling along the same path at one point, and Hoppe just kept it going. And I think if Murray Rothbard were still alive, he'd very much look like Hoppe today, and people would probably hate Murray Rothbard. A lot of people that like to lean on Murray Rothbard would probably hate him. And that's sad. I mean, like, if you can't do, like, I'm not saying that you have to follow Rothbard, and Rothbard is, he's the libertarian god and all of that. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that if you're going to call yourself a Rothbardian, come to deal with these kind of realities, right? And if you look at the evolution of his theory and where it was going, I really don't see how anyone can argue that Hoppe isn't the person that carried on everything Murray was doing.
Yeah. Marshall said it's Hoppe an evolution of Mises as well. Personally, I would say fucking Mises was fucking Squirtle, Rothbard was Wartortle, and fucking fucking Hoppe was Blastoise,
Yeah, I mean, I think that very much so that that Hoppe was the continuation of Mises, just like as Rothbard was. I mean, Mises had criticisms of Rothbard for sure. I mean, one of the biggest criticisms that Mises had that I can remember was when he said Rothbard had basically lost his mind when he was dealing with the left. And kind of Mises was right. And Rothbard looked back on that time and he was like, yeah, I was kind of retarded. You know what I mean? Like, the evolution of a human being isn't perfect, right? We all make mistakes in our thought processes, and we all evolve and we all make changes. I mean, for God's sakes, I was a neocon back in the day. I mean, if I met myself back then, I mean, it would be child abuse, but I would beat the shit out of myself. Like, how idiotic, like, those people are my worst enemies I could ever imagine. And now I'm like a totally different person. And I think that views and people evolve. And I think it's important to realize that. I think it's important to remember that when we're reading things.
Yeah, no, I do want to kind of touch on some of what you were just saying there with, Rothbard and how he evolved throughout his life. And, we touched on yesterday in Terror Gang and like critics of or critiquing like tactics going on currently. And it's like no one learned their lesson. Like, everyone likes to point at Rothbard and pick and choose what they thought was nice. But it's like he went through an evolution. There's a reason why.
Exactly.
He towards the end was like, what the fuck did I do? I really feel like if Rothbard was alive now, he'd be like, some of the shit I did early on was like the worst thing ever. Like, I honestly think the worst thing he ever did was start the Libertarian Party. Personally,
I agree, and I think he would agree with that. I mean, his initial attempt to fuse the left and right kind of more liberty-oriented people, that blew up. It was a fucking disaster. I mean, the SDS and YAF fiasco, if you ever read about that, I think David Gordon wrote about that. If you ever read that, oh my God, what a nightmare of events that happened. And then Rothbard kind of learned his lesson, and he was like, all right, well, we're going to go and try politics now. We'll create the LP, right? And then he was involved in that. And then what the hell happened there? You had a subversive problem there. The same exact fucking thing happened. It devolved and went to total shit. And then he was like, all right, well, there are egalitarians and hardcore leftists in here. I'm done with this. I'm out. Like, I'm not going to deal with this. And then I think it was 5 years later, he ended up writing about it. And he was like, I've never been happier that I left the Libertarian Party. And now people are like trying to go back and redo it again. I'm like, you're not learning your lesson. Learn your lesson. Rothbard learned the lesson for you. Let's move on and try and find a better way.
Yeah. No, it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to harp on it again. I could go on for that forever. And it's so frustrating because, but anyways, I want to highlight this super chat and have you give your thoughts on it because I don't really have much to add. I'm not really good with history, and obviously this is more up your alley. So I just got done reading All Quiet on the Western Front because of Jeff Deist. By the way, Jeff Deist is the absolute fucking man. I don't think I've ever heard a talk of his that I didn't glean some new knowledge from.
I totally agree.
I'm just curious what are Hoppe's thoughts on the monarchies and how it could lead to all-out war like the First World War. I think he's implying kind of like that the monarchies were a cause in some sense.
So my opinion on this is that it really wasn't the traditional old school kind of feudal monarchies that caused this. It wasn't even the absolute kings. It was very much constitutional kings that caused this, and it was the degeneration of the older way of doing things that caused this. It was the progress towards democracy itself that caused a lot of these problems. I totally would disagree with anyone that said it was the monarchies of the past that caused all of these conflicts and wars. It was very much the advent of legislation and conflict because of that. Hoppe talks about this in Democracy a little bit, and then or a lot. He talks about it in Democracy a lot, but yeah, I mean, I really don't see how you could blame this on going that direction. If you take into account Hoppe's view that the generation from a more feudal society to a more democratic society is the progress in which things move. I do, obviously, so there's no way that I could say, the World War I was the advent and the problems of monarchy. It was the degeneration of monarchy that really caused those.
Yeah. Real quick, one of the homies in my group chat's bitching that I didn't address this, but you know what? This would have thrown off the entire vibe, but fuck it, I'll do it now because you're bitching. You gave me $5 or whatever the fuck that money is. Jose, what kind of agorist doesn't have an alternative super chats? You need to be unboomered. I don't fucking know, dude. I mean, whenever I get booted off YouTube, I'll figure something else out. I'm on Odyssey, so anyone that wants to go follow me on Odyssey, go do that. I have no idea what their monetization is. Whatever, I'll figure it out when it's in. Now let's get into argumentation ethics. And once again, I'm going to try my best to not push back because I mean, I did go more the, I was big into like looking into like theism, atheism back in the day. So I am kind of familiar with some of these like philosophical questions because they do apply there as well. And so I do have concerns, but I also don't know enough to really argue too much, but I'll try to give you a little pushback in there, but I really don't want to do an hour on this because I feel like we could.
Yeah. I can just ramble, and then when I'm done, when you feel I've gone too long, just stop me, okay?
Yeah. So first off, obviously, what the fuck is argumentation ethics?
Yeah. So argumentation ethics, in my opinion, is a logical proof of self-ownership. If I was having to define it in one sentence, that's what it is. It's a logical proof of self-ownership. And the way that it does that is it says that, let me preface this by saying I'm not an expert on argumentation ethics. I'll do my best, and hopefully some other Hoppean guys that are maybe better at this than I am don't flay me. But I'll do the best I can. So first, we have to start with the primary criticism of the natural rights theory. And that criticism is that it is too ambiguous, and human nature being too diverse, it's hard to pin down a determinate set of laws, right? Like, how are you going to come up with a determinate set of laws from something so vague, right? So that's the primary criticism. Rothbard did a very good job, I think, of defending the natural rights theory, but I don't think he was as convincing as he could have been, and definitely not as convincing as argumentation.
It always struck me odd to try to make that an objective thing when it's so vague.
This
is why, not to go too far, this is why I like to undergird my beliefs in an egoism thing, because it's like it's easily to be like, well, I like natural rights because I feel like that's a mode of living that if we abide by, provides peace. So like,
Yeah.
so I prefer that. So
Yeah.
and that's kind of for me solves the issue of the natural rights dilemma, because a lot of people are like, this is objective, and like, I mean, I know we're about to get into it with argumentation ethics, but maybe, I mean, so I'm kind of apathetic on that right now. But that aside, I don't see how you can fucking make a claim that this is objective. It doesn't make sense to me. But now this might change my mind here. So
I don't fully buy the criticism that it's super ambiguous. I definitely agree that it is ambiguous, but not like a lot of people will be like, okay, well, this is so ambiguous, I could justify anything. And that's clearly not true. I don't think that that's right, but I do think it is ambiguous. Yeah. So
I think it's ambiguous enough to be able to be like, this is not objective. This is subjective.
I agree. I agree. I think we're totally agree there. Yeah. So, so looking at this, Hoppe looked for a common starting point, and discourse or argumentation seemed like a kind of a natural place to begin, because that's where human beings start, right? Like he's talking about this, like we're discussing this. That's why not start there? Let's break it down to our most basic level. We're talking about it, right? So, Hoppe studied under a guy called Habermas. I don't know if you're familiar with Habermas, but he's kind of a leftist. Actually, he's a hardcore leftist. He's a very influential philosopher among the left. Even today, he's extremely popular. But he was actually Hoppe's PhD professor. Habermas worked on something called discourse ethics. Discourse ethics essentially proposes any truth claim. Like if you anything you would claim as a truth, that claim is then connected with any proposition that is in fact true. So if you do that, then it must be raised, and like you can't bring up a truth claim without actually saying it, right? So you have to say that, and then in order to prove or disprove the truth claim, you have to settle that in the course of argumentation. Right. Yeah. So
anything, I could already get some objections here, but we would be getting way too esoteric.
Yeah. So,
but go ahead.
So basically, if you're asserting something, then that assertion as a function of reality will require some kind of discussion to prove whether it's true or not. So that's discourse ethics, right? So basically, there are norms that have been adhered to or accepted for argumentation to even begin, right? So for an argument to start, you have to have some kind of preconceived notions, and there has to be something that exists and happens, right? So let me think about where to go from here. So let me ask you, what is their agreement on in any argument, right? So what is their agreement on in any argument? And I think the only thing that you can agree on in any argument is that there's a disagreement, right? It's like if you're engaged in an argument, there has to be a disagreement, because then it's not an argument, you're just talking. That's presupposes what an argument is. So at least in some way, there is disagreement about the topic, and as such, there's an implicit acceptance that this person you're speaking to is making an opposing argument. And as such, in making an argument, you accept it is coming from them and that they exist. And as such, are making the argument, and thus their own speech, and thus themselves, right? So you're talking, and you're unless you're a schizophrenic, right? Like that person exists, and you accept that they exist.
Solipsist or whatever.
Yeah. So within that, so the great thing about this to me is what is in essence, like we were saying before, it's a logical proof, is that it is impossible to deny this, right? Like if we're talking and we're in an argument, we both agree that there's an argument that, you have to exist because I'm arguing with you. Otherwise, it's a performative contradiction, right? Like it's like saying I'm dead. Like the statement "I'm dead" is a performative contradiction. It totally it can't happen. It can't work, right? It's not logical because it fails the law of non-contradiction.
I would say though that like this already too is like kind of jumping the shark, and although it's a silly fucking thing, like I mentioned solipsism. Like if you're a solipsist, you could be like, I don't know if any of this is real, and you could be believing you're basically in a brain in the vat, but whatever, you're playing along with this little video game that's life. So I know this is retarded, but there's already like, you know what I mean? Like,
no, I get that.
Philosophy can get ridiculous because you do get into, when you get too deep into philosophy, you get into really weird territories.
Right. Yeah. Like the simulation theory or what have you. Right.
That's basically what solipsism is. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you're in simulation theory, however, I would say if you're in simulation theory, right, and you believe that, then why are you speaking to anybody? Is it just entertainment? And then at that point, you're not really arguing, right? Because there's no one to argue with. Right.
You're assuming that this is an argument, but yeah, go on. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, we could go back and forth on this and talk forever, right? So
yeah.
I personally, I think, the great thing about this is that it's a logical proof, and that it's essentially impossible to deny that claim, and that to deny the claim that you exist would implicitly be admitting that it's a truth, because then, if you're saying, hey, there's no argument, you're making an argument. Right? Like, you can't deny there's an argument without making an argument. So
well, some things are and some things are. You can't have a thing that is, therefore it would not be.
So I think it's brilliant. Probably the largest leap forward, like I was saying, in libertarian ethics, maybe ever. It broke through Rothbard. Couldn't he admitted that? Rothbard hailed it as a brilliant step forward. I think when you see a lot of internet Hoppeans or internet libertarians who use logic all the time, and I think that logic is a great place to start when you're talking about argumentation ethics. And if you really understand how to utilize logic and the law of non-contradiction, you immediately become a much better student of philosophy, in my opinion. Yeah. So
I like to use it for funny tweets because it does make, like, you can kind of create the circular argument. And I know it's technically not a circular argument, but you can make it. Like, for example, like one I did was clits are just little dicks. Therefore, women have small PP energy. For a woman to argue against this is to argue she has a huge lady dick. Clitoris argumentation ethics. Like, like shit like that. Like,
exactly.
I've made so many like different riffs off argumentation ethics, even though I don't fully understand it, just because like you can kind of like create this logical proof that is like circular and just to be funny.
Yeah. It's great. I mean, it's not only for philosophy, but entertainment as well, right? So, a funny thing about argumentation ethics that many people probably won't believe is that I kind of came to the same conclusion as Hoppe through a different method before I had ever read argumentation ethics. So people will cringe when I say this, and I came to the same realization through Descartes or Descartes, or however you want to pronounce his name.
I haven't really read him, so I'm
he's cringe. I mean, he's cringe, but I think that I try and explain this in the book that I was talking about. That I was
writing. A lot
of
the old philosophers are pretty cringe, but to be fair, that you got to realize, like, not to throw you off, but we like to look at old philosophers or anarchists or libertarians and criticize them. Like, say for example, like Emma Goldman or some shit. A lot of people be like, well, shit on her, but it's like you also got to think that like where she was operating off of. Like, you get to be in 2021 smug and be like, I know what's right. But it's like, you're standing on the fucking shoulders of giants. So
right, exactly. And that's why I get kind of pissed off at libertarians who like to criticize a lot of the founding fathers as well, is because I kind of feel like, hey, these guys are really smart, learned guys. I mean, really fucking smart. Jefferson's library was fucking huge, and he spoke 4 languages. I mean, the guy was a fucking brilliant motherfucker. Like I get kind of twisted when people are like, when act like that, but I can. So anyway, Descartes. So basically, Descartes has an existent statement. God, what's the fucking Latin? Cogito ergo sum. I think. I think, therefore I am. Right. I'm guarantee you've heard that. I think, therefore.
Vegito, I think it's from Dragon Ball. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Vegito, Cogito, same thing.
Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So if I think, I must exist, right?
Oh yeah, I think, therefore I am, right? Yeah.
I think, therefore I am. So
I knew the name. I just couldn't remember what he was known for. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I take that. I took that, and I was like, well, if I think, I must exist. To deny it is a performative contradiction, right? Because I can't say I don't exist, because the act of saying I don't exist or even thinking that is a denial of my existence.
But humans can be irrational. But anyways, go on.
Yeah.
This philosophy world can get retarded.
Yeah, it can very quickly. Basically, how can someone that doesn't exist deny its own existence? So if I exist, then I must own my thoughts, because again, the inverse would be a contradiction. I can't not own who I am if I'm the one saying it, right? So therefore I am. I think, therefore I own my thoughts. And as action, our action, our movement of our bodies, our speech, and things like that is little more than thought put into motion through our physical being. Therefore, I must own my actions as well, right? And if I own my thoughts and actions, and since thought is a production of our physical body, and action is a production of the physical body and thought combined, I must own myself. So that's kind of how I came to the same type of conclusion that Hoppe did. It's not necessarily argumentation ethics. I think argumentation ethics is much more well developed than my thought on this, but that's kind of how I came to that. I'm still working on, I would like to integrate this with argumentation ethics. I'm still working on refining the ideas and integrating them with argumentation ethics, but they line up really well. And I think that there's some starter there that I want to expand upon some more. And I don't want to start with a statement, because then people will say, well, you're starting with a statement, therefore, or you're starting with an argument, therefore you're in argumentation ethics already. Like you're doing argumentation ethics with more steps. And I don't want that criticism. So I got to find a way to get around that. But it's going to take some time. But yeah.
But I do want to say that, like, I've had people explain this to me before, and like I don't even really feel like I need argumentation ethics, just like you said, to be able to come to the conclusion that of self-ownership. Like, while I very much am like in a Stirner-esque worldview where like things are subjective and like, but at the same time, I feel like that's one thing. I mean, maybe obviously depending on how you define your terms, but for the most part, I don't really have any qualms with saying you own yourself. I mean, maybe in some crazy dystopian future where you can fuck with like minds and shit, you can make some sort of argument against it. But at the same time, it's like, even just from a practical sense, no one really has the ability to fuck with your thoughts in that kind of way. Like, they might be able to influence you.
And then if they are, I mean, I guess what I would say to counter that is, if they are influencing your thoughts, they've accepted that you exist and that you own them because they're trying to influence them, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that would be my counter argument to that. So, argument to me, I think that, I totally agree with you that, we can just use some basic reasoning, right? Like there's some basic reasoning here. We obviously own ourselves, but from a philosophical and philosophy perspective, I think it's a huge step forward. And I think it's important that people at least, roughly understand it, at least to, some basic level, like I think it's good, because if you're ever engaged in any kind of discussions, like we said, or you want to engage in entertainment, it's great. Right. So, I mean, it's a good thing to understand. Yeah.
But the point I was getting at is I have no problem with saying this does lead to self-ownership, which I guess in a philosophical sense is kind of profound, but in a practical sense, kind of not, in my opinion.
I don't disagree with you. Yeah.
But the thing is, I feel like some people, and correct me if I'm wrong, want to make this a jump from self-ownership to private property ownership, which I don't see the jump there, because I own myself does not mean I can say I objectively own things, in my opinion. Like, and by the way, I'm not saying that I'm not a fan of private property. I'm more of I think it's subjective, and I think that's a good way to live life along those lines.
So more of a utilitarian perspective.
To some extent. I know you guys, before I popped on yesterday, were shitting on utilitarianism. But like, I cringe to say I'm a utilitarian, but in a like big brain kind of way, I sort of am.
Mises was a utilitarian.
But I make the case, though, that what people usually associate with utilitarianism is shitty utilitarians. For example, we always use the example of like, oh, well, like, we could just take your organs and fucking save all these people. It's like, okay, but now you set a precedent. And like, from a utilitarian perspective, that's fucked.
Yeah. Look, I think there's use in utilitarianism. I think there's use in consequentialism. I think that there's use in a lot of these things. I just don't want all of my I just don't want my perspective tainted by those things. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to claim them as philosophy. I would like to use them as arguments, if that makes sense. Like, I think utilitarian and consequentialist arguments can be very convincing arguments. And I think that they can mesh very well with a lot of our philosophy, but I don't think that they're a good starting point, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, I guess, but I agree too. Like, if I'm making an argument, I will make the moral argument, although it's kind of funny because I am coming from a sterner perspective where it's like morals are made up nonsense. But at the same time, I do agree with abiding by a certain moral system because I do believe that leads to a better life for everyone. Like, I mean, if I don't want people to hurt, if I don't want people to hurt me and take my shit, like, it makes sense to be like, to act in that way so that other people emulate that, and also to some extent, you know, espouse that to the world that, like, hey, we shouldn't do this.
Well, yeah, and I mean, natively, it also, you know, as a result of that, then you can also say, well, if I don't want to be, you know, stabbed and shot and robbed from, then we should probably get rid of the thing that stabs and robs and shoots the most people, right? Which is the state. So, I mean, yeah, I think that there's some good arguments there.
But I get we're not using that because most people aren't able to come to this big brain time level of thinking. So if you're talking to some normie, you can't be like, oh, it's utilitarianism, because then they'll make some retarded utilitarian argument. And now you're in this silly fucking consequential world. It's a lot easier to be like, hey, guess what, buddy? Objective morality, even though I don't actually agree in objective morality. And I can be like, well, you shouldn't do that because that's bad for X, Y, and Z. Like, I don't want to have this deep level conversation with some dude I'm just trying to get, because all I care is that he gets to the conclusion I want him to. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Right. No, yeah. I mean, this is why I'm a big hater of the marketplace of ideas. I was I was so happy the other day. I was listening to a podcast with, I think, Jeff Deist and Buck Rebel, actually. And Jeff Deist was like, I really don't believe in the marketplace of ideas. And I was like, yeah, you know, like, yes, finally, I've got somebody on my team. You know what I mean? Because I don't think that ideas are look, this is why we don't believe in IP, right? Because ideas themselves aren't property. And as a result, I don't think that you can have a marketplace of them, because ideas themselves aren't things that you're exchanging like you would a normal good or service, right? I mean, there is a such thing as propaganda and lying. And, you know, that things aren't always objectively, provably true. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just look at a thing and determine argumentation, right? I mean, this is the whole thing beyond that. And in the day,
you're kind of out again.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah. But I would say, I mean, you could also make the case that it is a marketplace of ideas, but, you know, within that marketplace, there are other factors at play, and it's not simply a magical in a vacuum, just see simple ideas go to battle. Like, that's not how that works. Like, there are other external factors, or who's the messenger, which that's like why I've been saying a lot too, where, like, you know, for example, not to fall back in the trap of shitting the LP, but look at any fucking event, generally speaking, and look at the people that show up.
Yeah, like, exactly.
Are those people that are convincing? And you know what? I know we like to be like, well, it's the ideas, it's the logic. That's not how people operate. People see some fucking Chad looking dude, which to some extent, that's why Dave Smith does so well. No homo, he's a good looking dude. He clearly has good genetics. He speaks well. You know, he like presents himself well.
And he's successful.
Yeah, he's successful. And so when he delivers a message, people are like, fuck yeah, like, hell yeah. But like, if he was just some like idiot that had the right ideas, or was ugly, or, you know, I mean, fat.
If he looked like Konkin, no.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a fair criticism. But like, but even then, like, I don't really know how I never really like listened to any of his talks or anything. So I mean, even with them, there are things you can make up for it. Like, say if you're a fat guy and you have a gravitas about you, there's you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, there's still, but if you're someone who's unimpressive, how are you going to impress things upon people?
Exactly. Yeah, you can't. I mean, this is why you have a lot of politicians that are literally raised to be politicians, because they can influence people. They have a squeaky clean record. They went to all the right schools. They talk to all the right people. They're on all the right clubs and associations, you know, things like this. These people are bred to be quote unquote leaders, even though that they're false leaders, right?
Look at DeSantis. He looks like he was the fucking captain of the football team.
Football team. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is what people do, and you know, I think that ultimately, you can't take it like if you're going to the store, right, and you're trying to pick a mouthwash and you're reading the label and you're looking at it and you kind of know the manufacturer and you're like, oh, do I really, do I want the Equate brand? Do I want Scope or what have you? You're going to go with subjectively what you interpret to that. But not only that, you can be influenced. You can be influenced by what people are saying or doing or, the commercials that you read and things like that. But I don't think that ideas are ultimately the same way, because I think that there's something ephemeral about ideas that don't quite line up with a product or a good.
Yeah, they don't sell themselves. Like a product, you can be like, here's this thing. Like an idea is like there's so much that's cooked into it. All right, let's move on. We're getting super late in time. I want to quickly cover Hoppean tactics. What I feel like you can cover quickly, because I feel like Hoppean tactics are pretty simple.
Yeah. I mean, you can go read What Must Be Done. Great little article. Lays out exactly what we have to do, put in place these elements that we need to do. The only thing I would ever add to What Must Be Done is I think that it would behoove the libertarian movement to have some political influence outside of politics itself. And what I mean by that is, of course, lobbyists and a lobbying organization. I think that would be a very good use of resources and time to have. But ultimately, what Hoppe strategy is we take over stuff at the local level. That's where you focus. You take over small towns. You create these little cells and pockets all around the country. And then eventually, these things, if you take over enough positions, which it should be very easy if we are who we think we are, and then you start to pull them away from the mass, right? You're cutting them away from the mass. And if there's enough of them, it's going to be hard to stop, right? This is why I have criticisms of the New Hampshire movement, so of the Free State Project, because it's very centralized and you've got a target on your back and it's ripe for subversion. And if that gets subverted, you're done. You don't have a backup plan, right? You don't have all these little other communities that are doing the same thing. So if I had to explain it in 30 seconds, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Which, once again, not to jump the shark and get to the next point, but literally, basically everything you said, I could. Oh, hey, Mac and Liberty. But I could literally say that's basically what I say. But I would say for the agorism route that I would prefer. The only difference, I would say, doing it non-politically. So that's why I'm kind of saying we're kind of perfect allies. But we'll get into that. I want to know, what is your critiques of agorism, and then I'll kind of rebut them in a non-cunty way.
So I would say that ultimately, I think we probably disagree in that we're maybe we are allies. Maybe I'll grant you that, but I don't think that and I'm not talking about you and me, right? I'm talking about agorists and Hoppeans.
I think I already know where you're going.
Yeah. So
there's some truth.
Yeah. So I mean, there's. Okay, so if you read NLM, in NLM, Konkin basically goes towards this idea of more the I don't want to say consequentialist, because I don't want to slander what he's saying, but more towards the goal of agorism is more equalizing and egalitarian kind of nature of an anti-corporate state philosophy. And you ultimately have to oppose wage labor, and not only that, but it's a kind of an anti-hierarchical system. And as a result, on the Hoppean side, we're very pro-hierarchy, right? We like hierarchies. It's that we don't like unnatural hierarchies. And I think agorists would agree with that. Unnatural hierarchies are bad, but I think Konkin goes a little too far in that his analysis of hierarchies is that most hierarchies are bad. I mean, he hated the LP because he called it, what did he call it? Partyarchy or something?
Yeah, partyarchy.
Yeah. So he hated the idea of the Libertarian Party from that perspective, is that it was a hierarchy. And on the Hoppean side, it's like, we like hierarchies. Hierarchies are great, and hierarchies are great because the market is a hierarchy. The inequality that's created between men gives us the division of labor. The inequality that is created between us creates trade and separation and things like that. And these are all good and positive things, and that's where we want to go. I also think that agorists are probably more pro entrepreneurial than pro wage labor, as I mentioned a second ago. Hoppeans are very much pro wage labor, and the reason that we're pro wage labor is that not everybody, through time preference, and we can talk about that a little more, but through time preference, not everybody has the high enough time preference to show what an entrepreneur, not as high of a time preference as an entrepreneur needs, because entrepreneurialism requires risk and it requires high time preference because you don't always have an immediate return on investment, right? A lot of people are lazy and stupid. I mean, not saying everybody listening to this podcast is lazy and stupid, but a lot of people are, and a lot of people like that paycheck at the end of the week. A lot of people don't want to put a whole lot of effort. They want to go in and they want to be a drone, right? And there will always be people like that. And we see that as the natural order and not something that you need to fuck with. And if you start fucking with that, you create problems. That's 1 minute. That's my differences.
Yeah. So all right, with the hierarchy thing, I would say that I basically 100% agree, but I think the difference is, say, with like the hierarchy thing or with the corporate structures, is one little minor distinction, and I say this a lot, is, and I'm not against saying that maybe he was a little bit wrong in some of his characterizations. I think he was mostly on point, but like maybe he like characterized things a little bit wrong. The way I read it and the way I interpret it, and it's also been a while, is
same for me.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
I feel like he didn't view these things in binaries. I feel like he viewed them along a spectrum type thing. So like that's what I've been saying. That's been a talking point I've been using for a while. I feel like, especially with like the public-private, like a lot of people, like all like libertarians fall into the trap of viewing this as binary, and I feel like it's a spectrum. It really is. Like, because Amazon, if you're viewing as a binary, is private.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all.
So my point being is, say with like the with like entrepreneurialism, I do think in a pure anarchy, then like that is preferable. I feel like that is but yes, there are obviously going to be people who like are too shitty to like not be able to do that. But if you look at a system like he broke it down pretty well, and I'm not going to be able to do as well as he did in the book, that how it is like the most effective system in a sense. But he doesn't account for that there would probably still be wage labor, and that's fine. He's not saying we shouldn't have wage labor. He's just saying this is preferable. Essentially, you should act this way. And I don't necessarily think that's even really anti-Hoppean either. I would think Hoppeans would probably, correct me if I'm wrong, would say that is preferable, but you guys still accept the fact that there are going to be people who are the peasants that are like, well, you don't have, like, you're going to be doing wage labor because you don't have any sort of marketable skills.
Yeah,
so he's almost appealing to people to abide by that way,
I totally get your argument. Yeah. I would disagree with that a little bit in that Hoppe is very much pro-natural elite. And natural elitism would require there to be those people. And I think that that's more of an interpretation of like human action and, who we are as individuals, right? We're never all going to be that way. And, if you could somehow indoctrinate every human being to be an entrepreneur and or even 98%, right? You're not going to have the natural elite at that point. And when you don't have the natural elite and you don't have the inequality that is required of the human condition, then you lose certain important things, in my opinion, especially in the realm of the division of labor. Now, I know that agorists obviously have an answer to that, and that the answer to that is, well, if you don't necessarily need that much division of labor when everybody's an entrepreneur, right? So I get that argument, totally understand that, but I do think there are benefits that are unseen in that would require that, and then also I think if you're going to have those differences in people and people are going to be different, then you're going to have different things that come as a result, right? And I think that those are ultimately good things. I think that you're going to see, so trade is a perfect example, right? Like if we're all entrepreneurs and we all have, Bitcoin mining operations in our basement and 3D printers that can produce everything we need, and you have, super special, future Gene Roddenberry, replicators and shit, you're not going to need that. You're not going to have that trade. And trade is really important because trade creates separation and trade creates peace. And I think that ultimately I want to work within the human condition instead of trying to get away from it, because I think the human condition is beautiful. I think that our inequalities are wonderful. I think Hoppeans may cringe when I say this, but diversity is wonderful. It's amazing. It's beautiful. The differences between you and me, Jose, make us unique, and it makes us special. And I don't want to ever get away from that, because you end up destroying the human being, and I would hate to see that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess I would say that once again, I feel like he's kind of pushing this. He's not saying this is what it has to be, but sure. I would say that even if he got to his magical agorist world, that everyone's an entrepreneur, which I don't even know if I'd necessarily say that he actually thinks that's how it would be. He just that's a preferable mode. But even if you got to that, you would still have a hierarchy amongst entrepreneurs. So
in a way, you probably would. And I think where agorists and Hoppeans would be extremely integratable is if all of the kind of the disregard for hierarchy, if agorists really embrace the hierarchical structure of humanity and the natural inequality, we'd be right in line, because I think that a lot of our goals are pretty damn similar.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the way that we want to get there is similar. Now, you want to do different things, and I want to do different things. But I think that we're all working towards the same goal, because, I've never read Konkin say anything bad about private communities that do their own thing. I think that that's probably a preeminent goal of agorism, is to delineate people into these entrepreneurial spheres so we can create that kind of decentralized mass. And I'm more probably, I don't know what your personal inclination is, but I'm extremely far right. I like the conservative kind of, I live in a fucking small town. I know the fucking guy that runs a store, and this is my community, and I love my community. I'm still an individual, but I and not that I owe anything to the community, but I want to be a part of that. And I think that, not saying that agorists are totally against this, definitely not putting words in your mouth, I promise. But I think that agorists are a little further away from that than Hoppeans are, and I think that that's mostly where we're opposed.
Yeah, but I would say that's a bit of a misconception, and even then, I think that's a misconception that probably carries over into agorists as well, because
sure.
It's kind of once you set out a stereotype, then people kind of tend to fill the stereotype.
Yeah, the stereotype everybody calls us Nazis. I mean,
yeah. So you have the stereotype of some fucking dude that lives alone in the woods, and that's an agorist, and it's I actually would be the way I understand it is that what's ideal is to have a network. So you essentially are I think when I think of agorism, and what would be beautiful is if we were able to have something along those lines, say on a national or state or whatever level, is essentially what becomes the American dream, is having maybe a small farm where you're a little bit self-dependent, but you still have people you trade with and stuff like that. You're that. And obviously that's why I say it's the American dream. I'm not saying, or whatever, the state dream or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
That's what the goal is. And there's going to be people who don't meet that. That's the general gist. Whereas modern days, that's not a thing. And
right. And I mean, something that I'm sure that we can both agree on is that, the modern city structure and the modern city state is as far away from being a libertarian as possible. Any kind of libertarian, right? This kind of cosmopolitan idea of, everybody lives in a fucking pod and eats the bugs. And, we're moving away from getting people, out of the rural areas, and we're going to group everybody together, and we're all going to be a gigantic happy family, right? I think that is the most, for every libertarian, is the most egregious, awful thing that we can think of, right? But yeah, I mean, I do think that we can all work together. I think that ultimately, I do think, my personal opinion is, politics is a great way forward. I think that we can do a lot with it. I don't necessarily think that it's the end goal. I don't think that we want to engage in political strategy all the time, right? I don't think that that's where we want to be, but I do think it's a viable means of getting where we want to go. And as a result, go join the local GOP.
Yeah, which, I mean, that's, I guess, would be probably, for me, in my opinion, when it comes to at least how I view agorism and how I view Hoppean type setup, is that would be the only place where we really diverge, where you guys see more of a means for politics. And even then, I think I said on the show last night on Tower Power Hour that I did, like, I have an order of preference. Like, I get some people are going to exist within the political realm, and they're like because a lot of people shit on like agorists and be like, oh, we just think people aren't going to be in politics. Like, yeah, I get it. People are going to fucking do it. Like, I can't magically control everyone, but I do have an order of preference. Like, if someone was come to me and is like, I absolutely have to do politics, I'd be like, well, go read What Must Be Done. Like, go do that. If that's what you really feel like you need to do, like, that is the route. That's the ideal route. Like go fucking do it on a local level. But then I think, like, in my head, the way I see it is like, you know, we kind of pair perfectly. Like that's why I'm saying, like, we're natural allies. I feel like Hoppeans and fucking agorists are like the perfect allies, because if we existed in the same fucking community, it would actually make your political route more amenable and more able to do, because you have a group of people who are creating pockets of liberty. And I know I think you've said before that it can lead to more authoritarianism. And I kind of actually agree. This is kind of Popular Liberty's theory of archetypism. And it's essentially that power is like a fixed pie.
Yeah.
And essentially, but I have no problem with that. I have no problem with if I create more liberty for myself and it creates more authoritarianism somewhere else. I know a lot of people say, "Oh my God, like, I don't give a fuck." Like, and to me, that actually is kind of beautiful. Like, if we can get, and I think Hoppeans kind of do this as well. I think you kind of have a similar effect, because you're obviously looking at the local level, and you're going to create more liberty on a local level, and then thus create more power or more authoritarian power elsewhere. Which, you know what, I want to increase the divide. I want
I agree. I think that ultimately part of my strategy and part of Hoppe's too is that, you know, we want to create this divisiveness between us because it will create separation, right? Yeah. I totally agree with that. Where I would say I diverge with the agorist theory around, you know, like, okay, well, I said this exact same thing on Pete's show, which is, you know, like, you can point to a few examples in history where people that did that ultimately ended up prolonging the existence of the state, because they released the pressure valve on a lot of people's lives. And I want to increase that pressure valve. I think that operating within the state a lot of times, or operating within the state or outside of the state, can create that release of pressure off of people to not want to hate each other. And I want to increase that. So I've said this on Twitter hundreds of times. Hate is great, right? Because hate between us is going to cause us to realize that we can't live together, right? So those are the types of things that I push against. And that's kind of why I think that not necessarily you and me, like you said, you know, we're all on a spectrum a little bit, but I more than one, the autism spectrum too. But but you know, I think that I think that's where me and a lot of agorists diverge. And I think that it can create, and this may not be a fair criticism of all agorists, but I think a lot of agorists, and you know, people can do the same thing with Hoppeans. You know, they all the time. I see this shit on Twitter. It aggravates the shit out of me. So if I'm doing that to you, you know, interrupt me. But I see a lot of times they'll be like, okay, well, we need to create these kind of cartel organizations and things like this to work outside of the state. And I think that ultimately creates a ton of fucking violence, and it creates a ton of hardship. Like, if you look at like the cartels, right? Like, I could make the case that a lot of the cartels are very much an agorist organization, because they're trading in drugs and trading in weapons and things like that. And they are fighting the state. They're fighting the Mexican state right now, right, for control. But it's not necessarily a good thing that they're doing that, because they're creating chaos and disorder where we want to create order and the natural order, right? Yeah. So that, you know, and again, I don't want to paint you in any particular light. Like, a lot of people get me wrong because, like, on Twitter, I'm a fucking asshole. I'm a fucking prick, and I make no excuse for it at all. I like being a fucking prick, but I'm a nice guy, and I can talk to anybody as long as, you know, they're a reasonable person.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know how much I would really put into that criticism, because I feel like, yes, there's truth to that, and that, like, creating black markets to some extent. I mean, Konkin would say that he's creating red markets. So sure. like he would, like, obviously he's against violence. So, I mean, if you have that undergirding of that philosophy of, like, that's not cool, I really feel like it wouldn't create that violence. And I like, once again, I do agree that it does to some extent. I mean, maybe, I don't know if I'd say it'd prolong it. Once again, I would go back to, maybe it gives it's seemingly like it's prolonging it, but I think it just shifts the concentration of power.
It
just
could,
like I think
yeah.
Hoppeans do. Like that's the way I see it. So
It could. I think it's the application where you get a lot of disparate effects, I guess I would say.
Yeah, so but the whole point I'm getting at is like if you have a community of agorists who are essentially have created a pocket of liberty-ish, that's a decentralized, because that's kind of
That's
how
what
we
we
operate.
want. That's what Hoppeans want.
And then you guys can, if you want to, like, well, I think the politics may not work. Like maybe in this situation it actually would, because you have a community that's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, I'm not really cool with politics, but these like fuckers want to like uphold my property rights. I can't really complain.
Right.
Like, now you kind of have a perfect rulers and a perfect populace to rule over, essentially.
Yeah, I think like at the end of the day, like if we were in Capistan right now, I have no doubt that the Hoppians would trade with the agorists, right?
Yeah.
I have no doubt about that, because the agorists are going to have access to things that the Hoppians aren't necessarily going to have immediate access to, and we're going to want to trade for that stuff, right? So I think that we would play. Let me put it this way. We would play well in a diverse Ancapistan much more than, say, a lot of like the left libertarian, ridiculous shit would play. I think that actually think kind of funnily, agorists are don't take this the wrong way, but they're kind of like a disease to that more hardcore left libertarianism, because they're going to introduce things into that community that aren't being as, for the lack of a better word, policed. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna create that disease, and ultimately I think a lot of anarcho-communism and shit like that's going to collapse anyway. It can't exist because it doesn't have good economics, and you're going to end up devolving into a situation where they're going to go back to caveman times and start killing each other, and trying to raid other communities and stuff like that. So
which I think to some extent that's a fair criticism, because one thing that happens, and I touched on this in a live stream the other day. Someone asked why Hoppeans and agorists can't get along on a live stream I did a few days ago, and fucking like one of the things I brought up is like me just assuming, trying to give the best critiques you guys would have, is that I know you guys typically have issues with us identifying as left libertarians, which I don't personally, but the problem is Konkin identified it as a left libertarian.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, like, I don't know if you're aware, but I mean, a lot of people are aware that he was using a different definition. So he wasn't meaning it in the colloquial sense we use it today. He was meaning it at left and right being basically seeing a path utilizing the political system, left seeing basically being outside the political system. Like, so that's why I identified Rothbard as right. But the point I'm getting at is him just doing that. Like, obviously he didn't have the foresight of the future and how people interpret this later. So, I mean, you can't really fault him too much. But to some extent, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. So, like, because of the fact that people see this and like, oh, left libertarian, that's why, like, you got, like, I kind of played along because I completely agree. There are a lot of fucking faggots that are agorists. Like, there just are. Like, because this is why I'm like kind of in my head, like, should I start identifying more as like a wealth, power, influence? Because I actually see those as like, but they don't have a good catchy name. I actually see those as basically the same thing, but like with different packaging. So,
to me, from like I've had a lot of debates and arguments with agorists. From what I can see, you're much closer to me than I think you are to a lot of them.
Yeah, which also I'm getting the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because of the fact that it's like lefties. Like, or it identifies as left libertarian, it attracts left libertarians because they like, and then they get in there, and then on the other hand, you have you guys like, look at these fucking lefties. And so it kind of is like, if I had a kid and I called him a faggot his whole life, he's probably going to be a faggot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what, absolutely. I can see that happening. Yeah. I never really thought about it like that, but yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see that happening. I mean, Roderick Long talked about Konkin several times, and I think that maybe it was unfair of me to take Roderick's interpretation as everybody's interpretation, but Roderick's Roderick, right? I mean, he's a well-read, known left libertarian, and maybe he was absorbing that where other people could have interpreted that differently. I don't know Konkin's motivations. I don't know what he really thought. So I mean, I think there's utility in a lot of different philosophies.
I mean, to be fair, I read his books and I interpret them through my own lens,
right?
Coming from the right. So, and I just saw utility in them, and so I mean, maybe like and that's the inherent issue in labels, where it's like I'm going to put my own flair on it, and maybe I'm the correct flair, because I do think there's a reason people don't like agorists, because they fucking have a shitty marketing problem. We have a few of them. I'm not gonna like name names, but they fucking are cunty fucks. Like and they have been that on the large stage, and people like they just don't know how to properly socialize. I don't know.
Yeah, I get it. I think that I I would really like to maybe see a debate between like you and someone that's more um, that feels really steeped in the agorist left, especially the hardcore left logic that gets applied to agorism a lot. I think I would really like to see that. It might shift some of my opinions, and you know
you call someone a faggot. Is that what
but I think you make some compelling arguments. I think that you make some good points. I think at the end of the day, I'm never going to really abandon the hierarchies. And I'm not saying that, obviously, you made some compelling points there about, not necessarily being against hierarchies, and certain, entrepreneurs are going to have that hierarchy anyway. I don't necessarily know if
Konkin, not to cut you off, but even from an elitist perspective, that's what we're trying to create elites. So I actually like elitism. I'm very amenable to elitism.
Yeah, see, you're a Hoppean, bro. Just come on over. I know you're a Hoppean, bro. Like I know. Yeah. Like seriously though, I mean, to an extent, I think your opinions very much align with us very closely, much more than we can get in. Again, philosophy's a bitch, right? And people's interpretations and things like that. But I think that especially me and you, Mac and Libert, become Hoppean, man. Come on. But yeah, I think
I still don't agree. Well, I mean, like, I don't necessarily agree with the route you're going, but I do think it's like the next order of preference. So so maybe I could say I guess I'm an agorist with fucking Hoppean
tendencies. Yeah, there you go. So well, let me put it this way. I'd much rather associate with an agorist like you than a Hoppean who engages in some kind of socialism apology or something like that.
The tranny animes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
tranny anime PFPs.
Yeah. So, oh my God. But yeah, so I mean, I think this was a great discussion.
It's fun.
Yeah, I like this a lot. Actually, I thought we were going to be a little more at each other's throats than we were. So I think this was great.
That's what I was trying to say. Like, I don't really necessarily disagree with anything. And then when I've heard critiques of agorism from like Hoppeans, I'm kind of like, well, yeah, you're right. But maybe if you look at it a little bit different, then I'm like, okay, well, this so I don't like. Basically, I 100% agree with Hoppeans. I just don't necessarily. I see being able to do it in a non-political sense.
Sure.
Which to be fair, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like maybe they pair up well. Maybe I'm wrong about the political things. And so it's kind of like, these two things paired up, because you got to have people who don't want to be involved in politics. Like you have to in a community. Like you can't have everyone be in fucking politics. It's just not fucking. It's not a useful division of labor.
Right. Yeah, so, that's fair. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's actually a pretty goddamn good time to fucking go ahead and kill it. If anyone in the chat has any questions or anything, we can do that now. I'll give you guys a second. I'll let you do your plugs in the meantime, and that way, if we have any good questions, we'll fucking answer it then.
Yeah. So again, I'm Jared at End Democracy. It's on the screen there. Please follow me. I need a bigger following so I can press the good word of Professor Hoppe to the whole world.
Podcast, bro.
Yeah. Oh my God. So many people have told me that, like, why don't you start a podcast? And I'm like, bro, do you have any idea how much time that shit takes? Like, I don't have
not that time. Much, really, dude.
Yeah, but I'm trying. Like, our site is like needs work right now, and like we have a backlog of published articles that we need to get out. Yeah, but anyway, yeah.
No one reads articles. Do podcasts. I barely read articles. I read a lot.
Go ahead. No, you're right. Visit Hoppean.org. Mac, who's in the chat, she's our very wonderful social media director. So she runs all those accounts. Follow TheHoppean at TheHoppean on Twitter. Visit the website. Check us out on Instagram, Minds, Gab, any other thing that you can think of. We're on there. Just search for us. You'll find us. And follow those accounts, especially TheHoppean. I made the pitch for me, but follow TheHoppean. That's the project. That's what we want to do. We gotta get these ideas out there, because at the end of the day, we don't want the anarcho-communists to win, right? So.
I mean, not win. I mean, if they want to go have their fucking little commune somewhere, I don't give a shit. Like it's gonna go bad, but whatever.
As long as it implodes and I've got my wall up.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. Have fun. You'll come back later. I mean, you gotta have somebody sell shit too. So
Yeah.
okay. Well, man, I'm not seeing any questions. So I'll do my fucking plugs, and if there's questions, we'll address it then. And if there's nothing at that point, I'll do an ad read, and then me and you shoot the shit in post.
Cool.
I'm fucking No Way Jose YouTube channels where I'm at. I'm also on all the audio podcasts or podcatchers or whatever the fuck. I've got a few beers and getting a little loose lipped. Odyssey, I'm on there. I'm at Galley San Jose on Twitter. Patreon.com/NoWayJose2020 if you want to give me shit, because I like money. Like, share, subscribe, all that shit that I'm supposed to fucking say. Deuces. All right, I'm gonna play my ad read. Stick around for the ad because I get fucking money from this shit. All right, so fucking
watch his ads, man.
Yeah, fucking do it, bitch. If you love playing fantasy football but struggle to find the right resource to help with your research, the guys at Football Insider Edge have you covered. Whether you are a season-long player, focused on DraftKings or FanDuel contests, or just like to make the occasional wager each week on a couple of games, Football Insider Edge provides you with the research tools and in-depth analysis to take your game to the next level. With their proprietary model, matchup charts, and industry award-winning content, the team at Football Insider Edge have devoted themselves to educating their subscribers, helping them improve their play, and a few special moments winning life-changing money. They are proud of the community they've built through weekly interaction on their Slack chat channel and take great pride in helping others to achieve their goals of becoming better fantasy players. As supporters of the show and of the Liberty Movement as a whole, they are currently offering a 20% discount on any monthly or full season plan on their website. Just go to footballinsideredge.com and use the code Jose at checkout to take advantage of the discount offer today. So if you guys are fantasy football people, go check this out. It's a win-win-win. I win, you win, they win. There's no loss here. It's fucking capitalism, baby. Let's do it.